March 3, 1945, Eastern Germany. Forest trail 4 kilometers northwest of Görlitz. 14 men moved in single file through snow-covered pines. They wore white camouflage smocks over field uniforms. Weapons were held ready: MP-40 submachine guns, Kar-98K rifles, 2 Panzerfaust anti-tank weapons slung across backs. The lead scout stopped. His hand went up. The column halted immediately. No one spoke. Through the trees ahead, perhaps 200 meters distant, a building was visible, a farmhouse with outbuildings, stone construction, intact roof. Smoke rose from the chimney. Intelligence had identified it as a Soviet forward observation post. The mission was to eliminate the position, destroy communications equipment, and withdraw before reinforcements arrived. Expected enemy strength: 6 to 8 personnel. Expected resistance: light. The team leader crouched behind a fallen log. He studied the farmhouse through field glasses. The others remained motionless, spaced at intervals along the trail, breath condensed in the cold air. The forest was silent except for wind moving through branches. No movement was visible at the target. No sounds carried across the snow. Everything appeared exactly as briefed. The team was in position. The approach route was clear. Time 07:43 hours. Dawn had broken 20 minutes earlier. The team leader lowered the field glasses. He did not signal advance. He did not move forward. He remained crouched, staring at the farmhouse. His expression showed nothing. The men waited. The team was drawn from a Waffen-SS reconnaissance battalion attached to Army Group Center's southern sector. They had been operating behind rapidly shifting front lines for 6 weeks as Soviet forces advanced westward through Silesia. Their function was tactical disruption, targeting command posts, communication nodes, supply dumps, and isolated positions to slow the Soviet advance and gather intelligence. The farmhouse had been identified 48 hours earlier by aerial reconnaissance. Radio intercepts confirmed Soviet military traffic originating from that grid reference. Observation teams reported regular movement of personnel and a radio antenna visible on the roof. The position was assessed as a forward observation post coordinating artillery fire against German positions along the Neisse River defensive line. The strike team had departed their assembly area at 04:15 hours. Movement was conducted in darkness through forested terrain to avoid detection. The route covered 9 kilometers, mostly cross-country, avoiding roads and known Soviet patrol areas. Progress was slow and deliberate. They reached the final approach position at 07:30, 13 minutes ahead of schedule. Weather conditions were optimal for the operation. Temperature was -4 degrees. Cloud cover was light. Visibility extended several hundred meters in open ground but was restricted by forest density. Snow depth was approximately 30 centimeters, sufficient to muffle footsteps but not deep enough to impede movement. Wind was minimal. Conditions favored stealth and surprise. The target itself sat in a small clearing surrounded by mixed forest. The farmhouse faced south. Outbuildings included a barn and what appeared to be a storage shed. The terrain sloped gently downward from the forest edge to the clearing. Cover was adequate until the final 50 meters, where the team would be exposed during the assault. Standard doctrine called for simultaneous assault from 2 directions: main force through the front entrance, secondary elements securing the rear and preventing escape. Everything was prepared. The team had rehearsed similar operations multiple times. Equipment was functional. Ammunition was adequate. The plan was clear. Expected engagement time was 8 to 12 minutes. Assault: secure the building, destroy equipment, withdraw. Casualties were anticipated to be minimal given the element of surprise and superior training. All factors indicated a straightforward operation. Waffen-SS reconnaissance doctrine emphasized speed, violence, and immediate withdrawal. Small unit tactics against isolated positions required overwhelming initial contact to prevent organized resistance. Training stressed aggression and decisive action. Hesitation allowed enemy forces to react, request support, or establish defensive positions. The operational window for this type of strike was narrow, measured in minutes. The team leader had conducted 17 similar operations since January. His experience included attacks on Soviet supply columns, command vehicles, and small garrison positions. Success rates had been high. Casualties had been acceptable. His understanding of tactical dynamics was based on repeated execution, approach undetected, strike hard, extract before reinforcements arrived. This operation fit established patterns. His subordinates were experienced combat veterans. Average age was 23. Most had served on the Eastern Front for 2 or 3 years. They understood the mechanics of close-quarters assault. Grenades through windows, automatic weapons fire to suppress defenders, systematic room clearing, rapid collection of intelligence materials, destruction of equipment, withdrawal under covering fire if necessary. The sequence was drilled until reflexive. The Panzerfaust operators were positioned to engage any armored vehicles that might respond from nearby Soviet positions. Intelligence indicated no armor within immediate proximity, but doctrine required preparation for unexpected threats. The weapons were ready. The operators knew their sectors. If Soviet tanks appeared during withdrawal, they could delay pursuit long enough for the team to reach cover. Communication equipment inside the farmhouse was the primary objective. Soviet forward observers used radio sets to coordinate artillery strikes. Destroying this equipment would create a gap in Soviet fire control, reducing effectiveness of artillery support against German defensive positions. The tactical value was clear. The mission served operational necessity. Every minute the observation post remained functional cost German lives elsewhere on the front. The team leader had authorization to execute at his discretion once in position. No further orders were required. Battalion headquarters expected confirmation of mission completion by 09:00 hours. Radio silence would be maintained until withdrawal was complete. The team operated with autonomy. The decision to proceed was entirely his, and all indicators suggested proceeding was the correct choice. At 07:47, the team leader signaled the assault element to prepare. 4 men moved forward slightly. They checked their weapons. They adjusted positions for better angles of approach. The Panzerfaust operators shifted to overwatch positions. Everything moved toward execution. Then the team leader raised his fist, the signal for halt. The men froze. The assault element stopped advancing. Everyone held position. Eyes turned toward the team leader. He was staring at the farmhouse through the field glasses again. His posture had not changed. His hand remained raised. Seconds passed. 10, 20. The signal to advance did not come. The team leader lowered the field glasses. He looked at his watch. He looked back at the farmhouse. He raised the glasses again. His breathing was visible in the cold air, small clouds forming and dissipating rapidly. Still no signal. The assault element remained in position, weapons ready, bodies tense for movement that did not occur. The Panzerfaust operators glanced at each other but did not move. The rear security element maintained watch on the approach trail. No one spoke. No hand signals were exchanged. The operation had reached its moment of execution. And it stopped. The team leader lowered the glasses once more. He did not look at his men. He stared at the ground in front of him. Time, 07:49. 2 minutes had passed since the halt signal. The mission window was narrowing. Light was increasing. The longer they remained in position, the greater the risk of detection. The team leader stood slowly. He made a different signal, thumb jerked backward over his shoulder. The signal meant withdraw. No one moved immediately. The signal had been clear, but its meaning seemed impossible. Withdraw meant abort the mission. Abort meant return without engaging the target. The men looked at each other. Faces showed confusion. One of the assault element leaders, a sergeant with a scarred cheek, half rose from his position as if to question the order. The team leader repeated the signal, withdraw. Now. Movement began slowly. The assault element pulled back first, returning to the main column position. The Panzerfaust operators secured their weapons and rejoined the formation. The rear security element maintained watch while the others reorganized. The team leader moved to the rear of the column. He gestured for them to follow him back along the approach trail. No explanation was given. No discussion occurred. The withdrawal was conducted in reverse order. Rear security became lead element. Team leader positioned himself in the middle of the column. They moved back through the forest at a steady pace, not running, not hurried, but deliberate and controlled. The formation remained tactically sound. Intervals were maintained. Weapons stayed ready. But the sense of purpose had evaporated. Men moved because they were ordered to move, not because they understood why. After 1 kilometer, the team leader called a brief halt. The men took knee behind cover. Water was distributed. Equipment was checked. Still no explanation. The sergeant with the scarred face approached the team leader and spoke quietly. The conversation lasted perhaps 30 seconds. The sergeant returned to his position. His expression showed nothing. Whatever had been said was not shared with the others. The withdrawal continued. They covered the 9 kilometers back to the assembly area in just under 3 hours, arriving at 11:05. The route was the same as the approach, avoiding open ground and known Soviet positions. No contact occurred. No enemy forces were observed. The return was entirely uneventful. At the assembly area, the team dispersed to rest positions. The team leader reported to the battalion command post. The conversation with the operations officer lasted 5 minutes. The team leader then returned to his quarters. He did not address the team. He provided no after-action briefing. The mission was simply over. Men cleaned weapons, ate rations, and waited for the next assignment. Questions were not asked. The operational routine continued. The team leader's written report, filed with battalion operations at 13:30 hours on March 3, stated that the target position appeared to have been reinforced beyond initial intelligence estimates. The report noted an increase in visible personnel movement and the presence of what appeared to be defensive preparations not included in the reconnaissance assessment. The report concluded that conditions no longer supported the original operational plan and that proceeding would have resulted in unacceptable casualties with uncertain likelihood of mission success. This explanation was procedurally acceptable. Tactical commanders were authorized to abort operations if field conditions differed significantly from intelligence estimates. The decision fell within command discretion. No further justification was required. Battalion headquarters acknowledged the report and scheduled reconnaissance for reassessment. No disciplinary action was contemplated. The team leader's judgment was trusted. However, post-war testimony from the sergeant with the scarred face, given during repatriation interviews in 1947, suggested a different consideration. According to his account, the team leader had observed children's clothing hanging on a line behind the farmhouse. He had seen this through the field glasses during the final observation. The presence of children indicated that Soviet forces were using the farmhouse not only as an observation post, but also as temporary quarters for personnel with families, or that the original occupants, German civilians, remained in the building alongside Soviet military personnel. This complicated the tactical situation. Assault operations against mixed military-civilian targets created unpredictable dynamics. Children could be harmed. Civilian casualties would occur. The distinction between combatants and non-combatants would blur in close-quarters fighting. Standard assault procedures, grenades, automatic weapons fire, systematic clearing, were designed for military targets. Applying them in this context would produce outcomes the team leader apparently chose to avoid. The operational calculus shifted. The intelligence value and tactical benefit of destroying the observation post remained valid, but the cost, measured not in team casualties but in what would have to be done to achieve the objective, exceeded what the team leader determined acceptable. This was not a moral evaluation in abstract terms. It was a tactical judgment about what actions he was willing to order his men to execute and what consequences he was willing to accept. The decision was made in seconds. No consultation occurred. No vote was taken. The team leader saw the clothing, assessed the implication, calculated the altered parameters, and chose withdrawal. The choice was individual, immediate, and final. The team resumed normal operational rotation. On March 5, they conducted a patrol along the Nisa River sector. On March 7, they participated in a defensive action against a Soviet probing attack. On March 9, they were withdrawn to regimental reserve due to sustained combat attrition in the battalion. By March 15, the unit had been reassigned to defensive positions west of the Nisa as Soviet forces consolidated their advance. The farmhouse was not attacked by other German forces. Soviet artillery continued operating from that sector for another week before the observation post relocated forward as the front line shifted. Intelligence summaries noted continued radio traffic from the location, but assigned no further strike missions against it. The target lost priority as operational focus shifted to defensive stabilization along the river line. Among the team members, the aborted mission became one event among many. Some understood that the team leader had seen something that changed his assessment. Others assumed the intelligence had been faulty or that reinforcements had arrived undetected. The distinction did not matter operationally. Missions were sometimes aborted. This was accepted as part of combat operations. No resentment was expressed. No questions were raised in formal settings. The team leader continued in command for another month. His performance remained competent. He conducted 3 additional strike missions during March, all executed successfully without casualties. His reputation among subordinates was solid. He was neither particularly aggressive nor notably cautious. He operated within the norms of small unit leadership on the Eastern Front, competent, experienced, reliable. On April 8, during the Soviet offensive toward Berlin, the team leader was killed by artillery fire while conducting a reconnaissance patrol. His body was recovered and buried in a temporary field cemetery near Cottbus. The grave was not maintained after the war. His name appears on casualty rolls but without detail regarding specific actions or circumstances of death. He was 26 years old. The team was disbanded as the battalion disintegrated during the final weeks of the war. Survivors were scattered, captured, or killed. The unit's operational records were incomplete and largely lost during the collapse of German command structure in April and May 1945. No official commendation was issued for the decision to abort the mission. No criticism was recorded. The incident did not appear in after-action analyses or command reviews. It was simply one tactical decision among thousands made daily across the Eastern Front during the final months of the war. The decision had no strategic impact. The observation post continued functioning. German defensive positions continued receiving Soviet artillery fire. The war proceeded exactly as it would have if the mission had been executed. The battalion's operational log for March 3, 1945, contains a single entry. Reconnaissance Team 32 conducted patrol northwest sector, no contact, returned 11:05 HRS. The aborted strike mission is not mentioned. The planning documents for the operation were not preserved. The intelligence assessment that had identified the target was filed in divisional records that were destroyed during the retreat westward in April. Post-war investigations into Waffen-SS operations on the Eastern Front focused on documented atrocities and large-scale actions involving civilian populations. Small unit tactical operations that did not result in casualties or documented incidents were not examined. The team's activities in early 1945 fell below the threshold of investigative interest. No war crimes charges were filed against any team members. Most were released from prisoner of war camps by 1948. The farmhouse survived the war. Soviet forces used it through April 1945, then abandoned it as they advanced westward. The building was reoccupied by German civilians returning to the area in 1946. It remained a private residence through the decades of East German administration. The structure still stands, modified and renovated multiple times. Current occupants are unaware of its brief use as a Soviet observation post, or that a German strike team once approached through the forest and then withdrew without engaging. The silence in the records is complete. An operation was planned, a team was deployed, a target was reached, and nothing occurred. The gap between preparation and execution contains no documentation. Only the participants knew what happened, and their knowledge dispersed with them into captivity, civilian life, or death. The sergeant with the scarred face survived the war. He was captured by Soviet forces on May 2, 1945, and held in prisoner of war camps until 1949. During repatriation processing, he gave testimony about his service, including brief mention of the March 3 incident. His account was recorded in British military intelligence files as part of routine debriefing. The files were declassified in the 1980s but have not been widely studied. He returned to civilian life in Bavaria, worked in construction, and died in 1982. He did not speak publicly about his wartime service. 3 other team members survived and were traced through post-war records. One emigrated to Argentina in 1951 and disappeared from German records. Another worked in forestry in northern Germany until retirement in 1979. The third became a tradesman in the Rhineland and died in 1973. None left written accounts or participated in veterans associations. Their wartime experiences remained private. The remaining 10 team members were killed in action between March and May 1945, captured and died in Soviet custody, or were listed as missing and never confirmed. Their names appear on memorial lists but with minimal biographical detail. They exist in records only as casualties, not as individuals with documented experiences or preserved narratives. The farmhouse northwest of Görlitz changed hands multiple times as borders shifted and political circumstances evolved. The region became part of Poland after the war. The building was repaired, modernized, and integrated into the agricultural economy of the post-war period. No historical marker indicates its brief military use. The forest where the team paused and then withdrew has been partially cleared for agriculture. The exact position where the team leader made his decision cannot be identified with certainty. The operational doctrine that shaped the team's training and expectations continued evolving in military organizations after the war. Small unit tactics, special operations, and strike missions became more sophisticated. The fundamental tension between mission execution and situational adaptation remained constant. Commanders continued making split-second decisions based on incomplete information and shifting circumstances. March 3, 1945, was one day among hundreds during the final months of the European War. Thousands of small unit operations were conducted across shifting front lines. Most proceeded as planned. Some did not. The reasons varied: unexpected enemy strength, changed weather, equipment failure, flawed intelligence, command discretion. The outcomes were recorded or not recorded according to operational necessity and administrative procedure. The strike team that turned back while the enemy waited left no physical trace of their approach or withdrawal. The snow melted. The forest remained. The farmhouse stood undamaged. The Soviet observation post continued its function until circumstances made it irrelevant. The war moved westward and then ended. The participants dispersed into the vast displacement of post-war Europe. The team leader saw something through field glasses that caused him to abort an operation he was trained and authorized to execute. He made a decision in seconds that preserved lives, his own team, and others. He filed a report that satisfied procedural requirements without explaining the complete reasoning. He continued his duties until killed by circumstances unrelated to that decision. His choice left no monument, generated no recognition, and exists in historical record only as a gap. A mission planned but not executed, a target approached but not engaged. The enemy waited, unaware that they had been observed, assessed, and deliberately spared. The farmhouse remained intact. The war continued elsewhere, and the moment when violence was prepared, positioned, and then withheld dissolved into the silence of an action that did not occur, leaving nothing behind except the empty notation in an operational log and the private memories of men who walked back through the forest without firing a shot.